So there's just all kinds of ways. For every facial feature that there is, you can learn something about them. And then what you learn, it's much like cooking dinner, right? When we all start, we're like, oh, I'm going to add salt, and then I'm going to add pepper. And then people add in all these other ingredients until they make their own custom dish. Well, everybody's got a custom face, and you can literally go, okay, eyebrow height, eyebrow shape. What does their nose say? What do their nostrils say? What is their upper eyelid? What is their eye angle? What are their ears? You name it, and you start putting these things together, and you can almost tell someone their life story to a degree. Pays off. When I said that, she burst into tears in front of everybody. And when I first started doing this, that would freak me out. I used to like step away, distance yourself, like I didn't do anything. But then what you realize is they're tears of joy for being seen. They're not tears of sadness. And we feel lost a lot in the world because we become, what do we buy? What do we drive? But people forget to treat people like people a lot.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Life Edge podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Brian Galke. He's the creator of Subtle Skills. Brian, why don't you go ahead and take a brief moment, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Sure, I'm Brian Galke. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I'm a father of a 5-year-old daughter. And what I do is teach other people how to understand other people based on what their facial features say about them. So the company's name is Subtle Skills. Why was it named that? Because what I teach people is going to be, and what people learn, is really a life skill that they can apply to pretty much everybody, but you don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. So that's why I named it Subtle Skills, yeah.
So now the big question, what are these subtle skills? What is it? What are you talking about?
Sure. So in 2011, I'm going to tell a quick story. A friend came into town. We were supposed to go to dinner. I sat down at dinner. She said, hey, I'm not going to make it. I'm like, oh, here we go. And she said, no, you need to come meet this guy. And I'm like, why do I need to come meet him? She's like, he can read faces. I'm like, oh, yeah, I need to come over there. And so she's like, no, please come over here. Please come over here. So I went over there, guns blazing. I wanted to shoot holes in this guy, right? Like, I was already sat down at dinner. She blew me off for this guy, not in a romantic sense, but just like I was already sat down at where we were supposed to be. And so I came in wanting to bust this guy. Oh, he's going to use generic statements like you've had a hard time in life or something. And instead, I was shocked because he broke down 8 different people at the table and could tell them what they were and how they were. And so immediately I turned around, I bought his book, and I started driving twice a month to Fort Worth. I live in Dallas, like I mentioned earlier, so I could learn from him. And then in 2011, I got certified in this skill. And at the time, I was on the help desk. And what I learned was how to understand other people. So I'm kind of an introverted extrovert in that I love to be around people, but I didn't know how to really talk to people because I was stuck in the prison of my own mind. And this was the first skill that allowed me to be present in the moment, because when you're analyzing somebody's face, you're giving them your time and attention, and you get out of your own way. And it completely changed my life. So I still keep a copy of his newer book here, which is The Power of Face Reading. And he wrote the book. I'm working on my own book right now, but it's basically a version of how to understand people. Now, what I forgot to do, and let me go grab it, is I forgot to show you what the book I carry around with me, so give me 1 second. It was actually still in my backpack from last week's talk in Salt Lake City, but I still carry around this book to show people that it's possible to learn, and I keep it with me, so I had a booth. So when I tell somebody about what their face said, I would show them in the book where I learned it from. Because the most important thing about this is it is a learned skill, and that's what everyone needs to take away is 2 things. Number 1, anybody can learn this. Number 2 is it's about understanding other people, not judging other people. That's the first thing people ask is, ooh, can you tell me who's a cheater and who's a liar? No, this is resting facial features and just how can you understand somebody better. And I know it sounds hokey. I, like I said, went in thinking this guy's full of crap. You know, it's the same thing as palm reading or something else. And I was blown away. And I used this to go from help desk to regional vice president of sales, all by focusing on other people. And it just changed my life. It got to the point, as a matter of fact, I wanted to start teaching this back in 2015. He kind of blessed me to do it. But then I got golden handcuffs at work because I started getting promotion after promotion. And the idea of leaving that safe corporate job and the money I was making to do this, I kind of put it on hold. And then in 2020, you know, the world changed and we started working from home and everything else. So I started just giving talks on this to help people, because when people lost the ability to go out and interface with other people, we lost a lot of our social skills. And so now what do? Is I go around the world teaching this, speaking on stages. I spoke at Door to Door Con last week in Salt Lake City. And it's really helping people figure out how can they build a bond and rapport with other people solely based on their facial features.
So can you give us some examples of what facial features will tell you about a person, how you can read somebody's face, and how that helps you interact with them?
Absolutely. So it's funny, I get to be known as the eyebrow guy because that's the easiest one to teach, and that's what I talk about the most. And that's because you can see eyebrows from far away, you can see eyebrows from up close, and it's the easiest one because eyebrows lead to eye contact. And that's what a lot of us are missing with, smartphones this day and age and smartwatches and everything else. We've kind of gotten away from giving people our time and attention, and people feel that, right? If you've ever been talking to somebody, and I know myself well enough, I can't have a smartwatch, because if you and I were having this conversation and my smartwatch went off, I'd go, yeah, I'm listening. And people do that all the time. Like, even for the podcast here, I just put everything on Do Not Disturb because I know who I am. And even when I'm talking, I'll take my phone out, and I'll keep my phone on me for, display purposes and everything, but I know I have to not pay attention to it. And that's really what has changed with it. So when you look at someone and you go for eyebrows, there's two basic type of eyebrows. There's a high eyebrow and a low eyebrow. And let me backtrack for 1 second. I didn't do a good job of explaining this. So this has been around since the Greeks. Aristotle wrote about it. Then it was all the way through the 1700s. It was actually taught in academia. But what happened is the skill known as phrenology, which is bumps on the head. Well, if you had a bump here, it's like, you're a criminal, we should just throw you in jail. So it was about judging people. And what happened is when they threw out phrenology, because they said it was the science of bumps on the head, they threw out face reading at the same time. What's it taught to today? It's taught to attorneys for jury consulting. It's taught to business people, you name it. And my mentor, Mac, he used to certify people, and he actually taught it at Texas Christian University, aka TCU, under continuing ed. And once he learned it, he actually gave up his thriving law practice because it was more fun to teach people how to understand others. So that background is always important because people want to know, did I make this up? No, not at all. Did Mac make it up? No. He did the research going all the way back to the Greeks. So, but back to eyebrows. So we're all amateur face readers. We just don't know it. And that's because every author and artist used to write, who wrote a book, would take courses on physiognomy. Because if you think about older books, you couldn't take photographs and put people in. So the only two ways to describe the characters in the book were through their actions and through their facial features. And so we've all been reading books and understanding people. That's why when we watch a movie and they pick the wrong casting, picks the wrong actor, it's not who we read about in the book. That's why we're like, oh, that movie was horrible, because we read about, like, say, their angled eyebrows or their strong chin. If they bring in somebody who has a straight eyebrow and a small, or like a rounded chin, we're like, that's not right. And I know it sounds kind of funny, but stick with me here. Take one on the chin. I've got an eye for this. I've got an ear for this. Keep your nose to the grindstone. Keep stiff upper lips. They're all part of our, or keep a stiff upper lip is all part of our everyday language. And those are all phrases that tell you something about somebody strictly based on their facial features. So going over into eyebrows, if you like comedy movies, there's two types of comedies. There's highbrow humor comedies, and there's lowbrow humor comedies. Highbrow humor is where they tell you a joke, and you have to think about it for a minute, and then you laugh. Lowbrow humor is like the Three Stooges or Jackass. You instantly laugh, right? Physical comedy. Well, somebody who has higher eyebrows needs more time to process information. And so that's where the phrase highbrow humor comes from, or lowbrow humor. It's because of that. So if you imagine data racing down your forehead to get into your eye, the higher the eyebrow, it can only go so fast, and it's going to go over that eyebrow like a speed bump. So when you see somebody with higher eyebrows, you know, give them more time before they have to make a decision. If you see somebody whose eyebrows are almost sitting on top of their eye, that data can race down their forehead and they understand things much quicker. So if you're in a sales presentation and you have 30 minutes, you may leave going, oh yeah, I talked the whole 30 minutes. No, he was done in 10 minutes and he spent 20 minutes ignoring you because you wasted his time. So this is how you can learn to adjust, based on the person of what do you see in their facial features. So I used to be part of a demonstration team that any customer over $1 million, they flew three of us out to those locations, and we could practice everything in the hotel room the night before, right? Projector, PowerPoint, product, you name it, but people were always the unknown. Well, once I learned this skill, I would literally look around the room, and because we weren't told who would be on the evaluation committee until we arrived there, I could do this reactively. If I knew who was going to be on the evaluation committee, like if you went we did a lot of law enforcement corrections, you could look on who's the sheriff, who's the jail administrator, who's the warden, and have an idea who you were going to meet with. But You can walk into a room cold and still look and figure out, okay, who do I need to start with? The person with the higher eyebrow, because they're going to need more time. They're probably going to have more questions. Versus somebody who has a low eyebrow, they're going to get it quicker. So literally, I would start with the person with the higher eyebrow and work my way to the lower eyebrow. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So you start looking at people, and people ask all the time, well, what's higher, what's low? So if it's anything more than a finger, it's high. So it's hard to tell. The reason that when I teach a skill is you go and look up somebody on LinkedIn, and then you go to their social media, because you want more than one picture of somebody, because you don't know, like right now, my camera's up here, right? Normally I'd be looking down here where we are, but I'm going a little bit slower on purpose. So you start talking to people, and you really look at who has high eyebrows and who has low eyebrows, and that's a very, very simple way. Now here's the challenge. People with low eyebrows can be considered rude because they get the concept so fast, they want to help you get there, so they tend to interrupt. And it's not on purpose, and that's where I say this is about not judgment, but understanding based on facial features. So I used to get upset if somebody interrupted me. Well, then once I learned, oh, it's just part of who they are based on their facial feature, then I gave them grace. And so that's one of the things I like to say. A lot of things rhyme because I was raised in the time of Dr. Seuss, but with the face comes grace. Because you look at people and you're like, well, why aren't they making a decision faster? Well, is their eyebrow high? Okay, then they're not stalling, but if their eyebrow's low, then they are. So you learn to just adjust your pitch. Everybody knows what they want to say. I don't care if it's asking somebody out on a date, if it's convincing your spouse to go on vacation, if you're selling a product. We know what we want, but we don't always think about how would the other person best understand it. And that's what you can do is by learning their facial features, you can figure out how do I need to present the information so that I'm speaking their language. And to give a simple analogy, people always ask, well, is this manipulation? And so here's the story. I used to be a horrible traveler, and that was I would go everywhere in the world, and if they didn't speak English, I would speak English louder because somehow that was going to solve the great divide, right? Once I learned to put basic phrases in my phone of good morning, good evening, please, thank you, where's the bathroom, check please. When you try to speak somebody else's language, that mutual respect is earned. So even though I'm not fluent in the language, because I attempted it versus forcing them to only speak my language, it changes the dynamic of things. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Once you get the high or low eyebrow, then what you can look at is there's three basic shapes in eyebrows. There's straight eyebrows, angled eyebrows, and rounded eyebrows. And the easy way to think about it is you say straight eyebrows are get straight to the point. Facts, figures, data, stop talking and say, what other information do you need? So you can literally look at somebody who's got straight eyebrows and think, okay, get straight to the point. It goes back to what we talked about earlier. Because they want you to get there so fast, a common mistake with salespeople is they think time is quality. And no, it's literally, it's more quantity of somebody who's a fast thinker. So let's say that they have a low eyebrow and it's straight to the point. They want you to be done in 5 minutes, even if you have an hour long on their books, right? Because they have other things to do. And they want to be able to ask questions and stop. So if you see that, stop pitching, just get straight to the point of what you want, and then let them ask questions, right? So they've probably done their research. So if you're selling them a car, a house, whatever, they've already done the research ahead of time. So the longer you talk, they're like, you're wasting my time. Make sense? Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. Next one over is angled eyebrow, like I have here. So what's my angle? Help me understand it so I can help other people. My eyebrow, actually, I have pictures in my presentation, used to be straight on both sides. Once I became a corporate trainer, I noticed that it started to angle. And why? I had to understand the material so then I could teach it to other people. So if you look at people who have angled eyebrows, here's the funny thing. We tend to think, oh no, they're selfish or something else. Why do we think that? Because if you've ever watched any Disney movie, all of the villains have angled features. So angled eyebrows, pointed nose, pointed chin. And that's why you can watch any Disney show or any cartoon, you can hit mute and you know who's the hero and who's the villain. That's why we like and enjoy movies like my daughter loves Megamind, right? And Despicable Me. What does Gru have, right? He's the villain. Long pointy nose, and he's got all these features of the villain. And so you go to Megamind, pointed features. You go to Cinderella, any of these, all the evil witches, all have angled pointed features. So when we see angled eyebrows, those are authoritative eyebrows. And so what that means is if you see somebody, you've got to think, what's my angle? Help them understand it first so then they can help other people. So if you're selling to somebody who has angled eyebrows, Involve them in the process. So at the convention we were just at, we were talking about solar, roofing, and pest control. So if you're at them, they're door knockers. They got a really tough profession. And if you go and you knock on somebody's door and they got an angled eyebrow, then you have to think, okay, help them understand it, then they can help everyone else. So if it's somebody with a straight eyebrow, get straight to the point. Hey, here's what I have, here's what it costs, this is how long it takes. Angled eyebrow is, this is what we do. We're going to have our teams come out here. Do you want to be home? Do you want to be notified of what we're doing? How do we keep you in communication? You're making it about them. And the important part about that is people with angled eyebrows are the people who, once because they're part of the process and you help them understand it, they're the ones who leave you positive reviews, testimonials, you name it, because you helped them do it. And why is that important? Because the third people are rounded eyebrow people, and they think about the people around them. So who's in their sphere, right? Their friends, their family, their coworkers. So if you're going to sell a product, then you don't talk about how they benefit immediately. You talk about how everyone that they serve benefits, and then you bring it back to them after the fact. So, for example, in a house, if you're looking to sell a house, you don't walk in and say, what's the favorite room that you're going to have? You say, oh, are you going to need guest rooms? What are you going to entertain here? You know, who's going to come visit you in the house? But if you have talked to somebody with an angled eyebrow, what's the most important thing in the house for you? Is it a kitchen? Is it a master bedroom? If it's a straight eyebrow, then you say things like, what are you looking for? A 4.4, a 3.3? What interest rate do you want? What payment range? So based on just eyebrows alone is how you change the conversation. You're still selling the same product, but you're learning to ask questions associated with the people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, good. Everybody always asks like examples of rounded eyebrows. So my two favorite that I have in my presentation are Elon Musk and Oprah. Why Elon? Because after he sold PayPal, he could have retired to a beach, sipping margaritas, you name it. What did he do? He reinvested all of his money back into Tesla. What does it do? Electric cars to help other people. What did he do after that? SpaceX. Let's go to Mars. You know, it's not about Elon. I mean, yes, he's a public figure, but how much do you really know about him? Not a lot, but you know what he invests into. Oprah Winfrey, what do you know about her? Who she interviews and what she gives her audience. So when I did this talk on Friday, people in the audience go, you get a car, you get a car. That's what they think of with Oprah, right? Nobody knows about Oprah unless you've done research. And like, she had a tough upbringing as a kid. She was told she was too ugly and fat to be on TV, you know, all kinds of things. But we know and trust Oprah because she doesn't make it about her. Even though the show is her name, it's really about who her guests are and what she does for her audience. So that's how you talk to people with rounded eyebrows, or they think about everyone around them first and themselves second. So I always make the joke in the presentation, if you've been on an airplane, it's rounded eyebrow people that you have to say, in the event of an emergency, please put on your own mask before putting one on someone else, because that's what they would do, right? They would try and help someone else, and then they'd pass out. So the rounded eyebrow people are literally why you have to have that announcement on an airplane. So it's fun because you can do this anywhere. I always tell people, what are the ways to learn? So step number one, you can pick up the book like I showed earlier. Number two is we actually sell flashcards, and what that is that's a chopped up version of Mac's book. I am working on my own like I mentioned earlier, but part of my taking on what he used to do, because he doesn't speak anymore, is I said I'd help him get flashcards. And the reason I'm a big believer in these is, if you're like me, angled eyebrow, I would start in the book, but then I'd want to keep learning more and more and more. And so what would happen is I would try and go through every single thing in the book, and this was a way that when I was traveling, even to go to the coffee store, I would take a flashcard, put it in my pocket, and there's two things you could do. You could study it and just look around and try and identify who in here has this feature, or how many of them can I find. So that's step one, is just learning to identify and recognize those features. And then step two is, what do those features mean? And so then, if you want, this can even be a talking piece. You can lay it down somewhere, and people are like, oh, what's the card? And then you can talk, say, well, you know, this guy taught me about eyebrows. I don't really know if this is real or not, but this is what your eyebrows say about you, and people love it. So it's a conversation starter, or it's a quick way to study and learn things. But this skill completely changed my life, professionally, romantically, you know, because, I was an introvert, and this is going to sound like a sob story to a degree, and it kind of is, but it's not. When you're an introvert and you're in public, but yet you feel like you're alone on an island, and that's just not a fun place to be. And once I learned to focus on other people, then that's where relationships start. That's where you can go up and you can talk to people. You can network. And life is enhanced when you focus on other people, because people are so tired of oh, what do you do? Because all they hear is, oh, what can you do for me? So when you start focusing on other people, I love this one. This one has nothing to do with faces, but I always like to ask people, hey, now that we can travel again, where are you going to go next? Because people plan their vacation, people show up to work. So, and if you ask somebody, what do you do? What if they hate their job? Now they subconsciously hate you for asking about the thing that they hate, right? So it's just learning to focus on other people. And a great book to cover this is, if you've ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And in that book, he covers literally every step of the atrocity of going to a concentration camp. From, you get off the train and somebody says, go this way, you live, go this way, you die. But what he found is, he was a doctor, so he was helping to attend to other prisoners. And the prisoners who were focused on seeing other people, their wife, their mother, their dog, their sibling, you name it, again, they were the ones who survived these inhumane conditions. And the moral of the story with that is, we can do more when we don't just focus on ourselves. Now, we do have to be our own, biggest supporter, but really, if you think about it, acts of service, helping other people, always benefits two people. The person you're helping and you as well, for doing good. There's almost like a karma thing to it, and I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but there's numerous people who will say, if you're in a rut, go help somebody else out, and you'll get out of it, because by doing something for somebody else, you remember what you can do and what's possible. So, other facial features?
Wow.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
All I gotta say is, wow, you've just given a masterclass so far on living a great life. And before we jump into other facial features, because I'm really curious about some other facial features, and I'm gonna have to go back and listen to there was so much in just what you just did. You had mentioned right in the beginning that you went from straight eyebrow to the arched eyebrow.
Right.
So that implies that facial features change. What causes some of that change, and how do people, and why would somebody want to change, I guess, would be the other question.
Sure, and thank you. When I don't have my PowerPoint, I ramble on. So usually when I talk about physiognomy, I mention this. So there's 42 muscles in the face. The mind creates movement. Movement creates muscle. And so what happens is, we both have a right brain and left brain hemispheres that think, and it controls a side of our face. So yes, we're all a little bit two-faced in that we have a professional side and a personal side to our face. Easy way to remember is, if I say, hey, are you married? It's a personal question. A wedding ring would go right here. So this is everyone's personal side, regardless of if they're right-handed or left-handed. This is always the personal side. Well, sorry, for the people listening, where a wedding ring would go, aka the left side of your face, is your personal side. In the right side of your face is your professional side. Well, what happens is, what we're born with is genetics, right? What did we inherit from our grandparents, our parents, our lineage, you name it. But then what happens to us over time is known as epigenetics. So what happens is, we make faces because our brain tells us something, then those muscles move, and what happens is, our parents told us when we were kids, stop making that face or it'll get stuck that way. Well, there's literally some truth to that statement. Because if you keep making faces over time, your face goes that way. People go, oh, it can't be true. I'll say, okay. And I have on the PowerPoint, I have a picture of a guy, big, huge upper body, wide shoulders and all that, and little tiny legs. Well, that's not genetics. He chose not to work out his legs, but he loved to work out his upper body. So it's the exact same thing, because our face is nothing but muscle. So in kind of a morbid fact, when somebody has a stroke or has Bell's palsy and one side of their face just droops, we don't recognize the person, because they lost that muscle movement. What is Botox? Botox is a muscle paralyzer. So all that it does is it temporarily paralyzes those muscles, since everybody gets them here, right? That to not make those lines be seen. First off, they're not wrinkles, they're lines that tell people, like a map, where have you come from? Not where you're going. It can't predict the future. It tells people, how do you process information, how do you think, and what have you experienced so far in life? Now, how can you change your face? I just sent an article to somebody yesterday. Smiling is a very simple one. If you've had a tough life, if you've been where you frowned a lot and you go, what'll happen is you'll actually get a downturned mouth over time. How do you fix that? You can smile. And they were talking about how smiling, it raises your cheeks. It's like, if you smile enough, that's why people who smile a lot, they look like they had a facelift, because it takes so many muscles in your face to smile versus frown. is not that many. So you can change your face, and it shows that when you smile, endorphins are released. There's mirror neurons in other people. When you smile, they smile. There's so many ways to do it. Now, as far as eyebrows, well, it's because when you're learning your thinking, you're always raising your eyebrow up. And what happens is that eventually creates the angled eyebrow that I have here. So yeah, I'll have to, let me see if I can find the other picture. I'll show you an example of it. I have it in my presentation, so I can show you a picture of me at 18 versus 38, and you'll be able to see the difference, because it is crazy. Like I said, I didn't go and get my eyebrow changed. It literally did it over time. Because I always, in my presentation, I show my own face because, then nobody wants to look at me, right? They're like, oh, here's the guy who reads faces, so they do this the rest of the time. So now, in the very beginning of my presentation, I just start with me. I may just have to take a new picture of it.
What was interesting too is you had mentioned that people are like concerned about possibly manipulating and for manipulating the other person. And for me, I see as if we can get on the same page and I understand how you communicate and you understand how I communicate, and this could just be the CEO and founder in me, is
right.
We can now become significantly more efficient in what we're talking about and what we're doing, and we don't have to waste time conversing in ways that we're actually not connecting, or you're misunderstanding or I'm misunderstanding.
Absolutely. I have a funny story about that, but this was me as a kid. So if you see the differences in my face, right? So I used to have straight eyebrows. Then my eyes used to angle down quite a bit, and I'll talk about that there in a second. But look, I had straight. I didn't have the angled eyebrows that I have now. Like I said, I didn't go to the doctor to get this done. It's what happened over time. You can also look at, like, not only did I have badass hair, right, but my ears used to stick out more than they do. Then just numerous features that you can see on somebody's face that change over time. So that's why I show the picture of me at 38 and versus 18, because our faces are constantly evolving based on what we experience. You can actually take identical twins, same genetic code, raised in the same household, but one may have struggled in school, one may have struggled in sports, you name it. So even identical twins have different facial features. So that's why most people can't tell twins apart. I can tell twins apart because you just look at what happened on their personal side, what happened on their professional side. Do their eyes angle up? Do they angle down? So like I mentioned earlier, my eyes angled down. I was raised in a very loving household, but they were always worried about, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And so people whose eyes angle down, they're always worried about what can possibly go wrong? What do you need to prepare for? So they're not pessimists, they're preppers, right? They're like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? People whose eyes angle up, and it can be either eye, right? It could be their personal side may be up and their professional side may be down. But if their eye angles up, tell me about the good side. Tell me something positive. And you learn this. So, for example, when I used to do presentations, if their eyes angled up, I would talk about the features and the benefits of the product. And you look at the people, because there's more than one person in the room. If somebody's eyes angled down, I would say, this isn't the first version of our product. This is actually the third generation. These are the things that we learned from the mistakes in our previous versions. So then you're speaking everybody's language at the exact same time, right? Because you're talking about the people who think, okay, is it all, rose-colored glasses about this product? No, we had problems in the first one. That's what we've learned and what we've improved. So you learn how to speak to different people, so once again, you're speaking their language. And it makes a difference. You asked earlier about, like, from a business perspective, this can be used in business-to-business transactions. And again, it's just trying to create that communication between two people when you're doing it. And when you learn to speak somebody's language, it makes a difference. You asked earlier, like, how could you use this? In my personal life, when I was married, my wife was more auditory and I'm more visual. So you can tell, and how can you tell? Well, there's two ways. One, when you look at someone, if they have much larger ears than eyes, then they're auditory. If they have larger eyes and smaller ears, then they're visual. Well, I, being the visual one, like an easy way if somebody was just to listen to me, not even hear my face, since there's some people that are listening on audio, you listen to how people speak, and then you just speak their same language back to them. So, for example, even when I hang up a phone call, I say, all right, I'll see you later, because I'm a visual person. So when I used to go to the store, if my wife would tell me, hey, I need you to get this, 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 and this, I'd come back with like 2 of the right things and 3 of the wrong things. And so what we had to do is we had to come up with a system of, if I was the one going to the store, she had to text it to me. And then I could visually see it, and I came back with all the right things. Conversely, she was auditory, so she would get frustrated if I would text her what I want. She's like, just tell me what you need. So people who are auditory, they're listening to your words. And a big frustration with people who are auditory is they take you at your word and they hold you to your word. So if you can't say the same thing twice or you don't, quote, live up to your word, it frustrates auditory people. Versus visual people, send me a text, send me an email, you name it. And then when you're talking to them, you say things like, for visual people, oh, hey, do you see where I'm coming from? Picture this, imagine this, all visual terms. If they're looking their auditory, larger ears, you say things like, hey, does this sound like a good idea? Can you hear where I'm coming from? And again, it's just attempting to speak their language. There's the show The Voice, where everybody started this way, and if they liked who they heard, then they turned around to look and see who the artist was. All of those musicians had larger ears and smaller eyes. And people go, well, yeah, but that's because they're musicians. I'm like, it just reinforces my point even more because, like, I suck. Funny thing, I didn't think I was going to graduate college because of songwriting, right? Like, I took an elective. I'm like, I need a creative art. Oh, look, I can rhyme. I read Dr. Seuss as a kid. But you had to learn keys of music, and I am like tone deaf. I can't tell the difference between keys when it comes to that. Like I can write the rhythm part, but not the actual notes themselves. And so that's the example. I literally that course. If I didn't go to the professor for extra help and show him like I was trying to learn, I would have failed that class and not graduated college because of songwriting. Right? So and I've never told that story before. That's kind of funny. So it's just learning to speak someone else's language. It's a sign of respect because you're trying to engage with them versus anything else.
Fascinating. I am just we met before. We've had some great conversations, and you explained this to me once already, and I'm still just blown away at even since then of how accurate a lot of what everything that I can remember that you said the last time. I see it coming true and being very useful in the world to just make the world a better place, not to manipulate people, not to do anything, just to be able to. How much better do you feel when you're communicating and somebody understands you and you understand them? The relationship is better, the communication is better.
Yes.
It makes so much sense to me. So now let's go ahead and let's dive. What are some of the other facial features we've talked about? The eyebrows, sure. The eye to ear ratio. What else is there?
So we talked about the eye angles. So if you talk to somebody whose eyes angled down, and what I love about this skill, and I didn't do a good job of mentioning this earlier, what really changed this for me, because I'm a big believer in body language, so like I always keep Janine Driver's book right here, You Say More Than You Think, because during the pandemic, we were all stuck inside of our houses and we didn't get to interact with people for quite a while. And what happened is we forgot a lot of things. Some people forgot how to put on pants, like, right? Like people are like, oh, I got clothes from here up, and they didn't leave the house. And it's funny because that's what a lot of what led to the Great Resignation is people realized how unhappy they were by the people they were surrounded by. But it also, some people became almost agoraphobic where they wouldn't leave their house. And then they got so used to only talking to people on Zoom. Well, body language is important, but how do you use it on a Zoom call? I can't see your hands. I can't see your legs. I can't see your arms. So how much body language can I tell by Zoom? You can't see a lot. But I can see your whole face. And the best part about it is I can go to LinkedIn or social media before we even got on here, and I could have dissected your face a little bit. And literally, I'll show you examples of like what I'll do. Is I'll go and find somebody's face and I'll analyze it before I ever meet up with them. And I'm going to show you an example. As I was talking to somebody who knows Jesse Itzler, and they're like, "Hey, can you break down his face?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So then I'll show that to you. Give me 1 second here. Oh, actually, I'll use my own. So this is what you could do with somebody's face. Oh, sorry, I got that part out there. Don't need the info. So what you can do is you can go find a picture of them. So this was what I was talking about earlier. It's part of my presentation. These are all the things that you can identify on a person. And so you can literally go just to LinkedIn, find a picture of them. Here's the one I was going to show you also. Whoops, went one too far. So here is Jesse Itzler, and everything that you can see on his face just by going and finding a picture of him. So you can see what his nostrils tell you, what his eye angles tell you, what does his chin tell you. So you name it, you can just go out and find everything about someone and just figure out how do I need to change what I want to say to speak their language. So for example, with Jesse here, he has a very full upper eyelid. That's a we person. So an easy way to remember it is the more lid you see, upper lid, the more they think in terms of we. Now, I don't have a lot of upper eyelids, so I'm fine doing things by myself. If people want to join me, it's a bonus versus a requirement. When you see somebody has a very fuller lid, they really enjoy doing things with other people. And so they call it a Bambi lid, you name it. And so when you meet somebody like that, you say, hey, where are we going? What are we going to do? You start using inclusive language versus you can use you language or I language to people who don't have a lot of upper eyelid. So there's just all kinds of ways. For every facial feature that there is, you can learn something about them. And then what you learn, it's much like cooking dinner, right? When we all start, we're like, oh, I'm going to add salt, and then I'm going to add pepper. And then people add in all these other ingredients until they make their own custom dish. Well, everybody's got a custom face, and you can literally go, okay, eyebrow height, eyebrow shape. What does their nose say? What do their nostrils say? What is their upper eyelid? What is their eye angle? What are their ears? You name it, and you start putting these things together, and you can almost tell someone their life story to a degree. And that is, hey, your auditory, your visual, you like to hear the upside of things, you like to hear the downside of things. Nostril size, nostrils are kind of like umbrellas. The wider they are, the more they think of how to kind of take care of other people. So very abundant nostrils think, oh, I can take on a lot. People with very small nostrils think in terms of scarcity, like, I don't have enough air to breathe. It's funny, when you start looking at people, you can see all these different things about them. And a story I tell in my presentations are, I went to a wedding in Jekyll Island. And when we got done with the wedding, you're at the reception and everything, and our server came over, filled up our water glasses and our wine glasses, and I noticed that his name badge said Hungarian. I'm like, okay, I've been to Budapest, I got this. So when he went away, I got on my phone and I looked up how to say thank you in Bulgarian or in Hungarian, and it's Köszönöm. So when he came back and he filled up our water glasses again, I said, Köszönöm. He said, what? I said, Köszönöm. I wanted to say thank you. I saw your name badge is Hungarian. He's like, you speak Hungarian? I was like, well, I've been to Budapest, and I tried to learn these phrases. And so I took a few seconds to make him feel seen and heard, versus everybody else is just, tell me, you're my servant, go serve me. Guess whose wine glass was never empty the rest of the time? Mine, but the entire table. Because he was happy to come back and visit our table because we made him feel seen and heard instead of just behind-the-scenes servant. And when you do this with people, like, I've been in presentations, you can ask Steve Sims this, and we did a private speakeasy in the exact same house I met you in a year prior. And there was a girl there, so we did with this awesome group called the Black Diamond Club that works with chiropractors and small business owners and everything. And one of the girls came up, and she had several features. She had big rounded eyebrows, she had fuller lids, a flatter upper lip, a rounded chin, and then she has the same line that you have here. So we talked about this earlier, a verbal affirmation line. Well, when you see somebody who has a lot of round features that are always taking care of everybody else, but this little line like you have in your chin here, so for the people listening, it's a horizontal line across below the lip and above the chin. When you see somebody who has that, that is somebody who is into verbal affirmation, right? So money's great, title's great, but a sincere thank you for their hard work pays off. When I said that, she burst into tears in front of everybody. And when I first started doing this, that would freak me out. I used to step away, distance yourself, like I didn't do anything. But then what you realize is they're tears of joy for being seen. They're not tears of sadness. And we feel lost a lot in the world because we become, what do we buy? What do we drive? But people forget to treat people like people a lot. And especially people who have a lot of rounded features, they're running around doing so many things for other people. And we've been taught, be quiet, just your hard work will be seen. But that doesn't always make everybody happy. Some people are all title driven. Some are cash driven. But when you see a verbal affirmation, sincere verbal compliments go a long way for that person. That's why she cried, because I said, look, I know you're doing a lot for a lot of people, but if you don't tell them, because she had a flatter upper lip, what you're doing for people, don't keep score, but if you don't tell them or show them what you're doing for them, you're never going to get that verbal affirmation that you're looking for. And that's what made her burst into tears. Now, we're great friends now. I was on their podcast last time I saw him in Miami, and it's one of those things, is her husband always jokes, oh, here's the guy who made my wife cry, right? But it was tears of joy for being seen for who she was. And that's all we want, is we want to be seen for who we are, not what we drive, what we do, all those things. We still want to know that we're being seen as a person. Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah. And what I'm gathering from this whole conversation is you don't just understand facial features, but you have a great understanding of people. And is that something that the book, what you've taught or what you've read or learned from Matt, is that something that he covered, or is that just something intuitively you put together as you've learned about these facial features?
Like most people, I'm a culmination of all the books that I've read. And we were having this conversation in Salt Lake. The problem with people who are naturally good at things is they can't teach it to other people. The good thing about introverts, like Steve Sims will talk about this all day long, so will, the guy that runs the Genius Network, Joe Polish. Introverts are great because introverts had to learn, and that's why they can teach it to other people. Naturals can do things naturally, so they can't necessarily dissect it and help people to benefit from it. And that's where I came in, is again, even though I had siblings and everything else, I always felt like an outsider to a degree. And so I've my entire life been searching for other ways to bond with people. So whether it's my bookshelf that's over here, I can't fit back here, is all full of books like Body Language, NLP, books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Every time I saw a book that I thought could help me interact with somebody else, I would pick it up. And it's just, you learn over time, what do people respond to? And that's one of the big things with this is so many people, so Mac has certified well over 100 people in this, but nobody really uses it. And now it also happens to be that I live local, so any gigs that come to Dallas or he gets referred to, I'm one of his first people to go to and say, go teach this. But it's because you have to learn it. But like this skill with anything else, if you don't practice what we talked about today, it's like, oh, hey, I heard this thing from this face reader guy, and then you try to explain it to somebody else. Go out and try it. You just have to remember, high eyebrows, give them time. Low eyebrows, get straight to the point, or get there quick. Straight eyebrows, get straight to the point. Angled eyebrows, what's my angle? Help me understand it so I can help other people. Rounded eyebrows, think about the people around them, right? Those 5 basic things only work if you go out and test it. And so I challenge people. I say, assume like I did that I'm full of, I don't know if I can cuss here, assume I'm full of it, right? But then go out and try it, and I guarantee you it will change how you interact with people. And here's the secret with it. Even if you don't do the conversion and you just think, are they high, are they low, what shape are they, you're giving them your time and attention. And people feel that more now than ever. So this is this one's going to blow your mind. And I learned this last week. I went to a leadership training for police officers. It was really cool. I got invited by some people. They teach micro expressions. They teach leadership and everything. Most people blame modern technology for the lack of social skill. But you know what the biggest game changer was as to why people don't have as many face-to-face communications? You're gonna love this. Air conditioning. Prior to air conditioning, people didn't have a reason to stay inside. That fact blew my mind. And he had a study and he gave facts, but people used to sit on their front porch, right? And that's why houses, like I used to own a historic home, all the houses on the historic street had front porches because that's where you socialized. That's where you met your neighbors. You went outside and had a drink. They had porch parties, all kinds of things that we don't do anymore. I live in a townhome now. You know what I do? When my neighbors see me, when I'm pulling out of my garage and when I'm going back into my garage, because there is no common socializing area. And that is something that, if you look right now, what's the majority being built is townhomes, because on one plot of land you can put 4 houses. And so it's going to have an interesting side effect of, if you don't have an outdoor patio where people can see you, or a rooftop where you see your neighbors, we become isolated other than forcing ourselves to go out for social interaction. And I do have a daughter, and while I think technology will help her, I also want her to know how to converse with people. So like we have rules when we go out to eat is she can't get on the iPad until we've gone to the restaurant, we've socialized with everybody, and if she finishes her food early, or if we're adults and we bump into somebody we know and we're having adult conversations that she can't be a part of, then I'll give her my phone. Or if she's done eating and she ate, not to get to the iPad, but she's done eating and waits a few minutes, then we'll give her the iPad if we're out and if we have it with us. But I see people who walk into a restaurant and immediately slap their kids in front of an iPad and stick headphones on them, and I worry about those kids, because how are they going to be taught to interact with other people? And I am one of the guiltiest ones of being out and being on my phone. So it's not to talk trash. I just paying attention to what we're teaching our kids. So there's actually a slide in one of my presentations where there's a little kid holding up a sign for help, and both parents are on their devices not paying attention to them. So it's just this effect of, in my mind, this skill is needed more than ever because we're losing the ability to have face-to-face communications. 4 people called me today. You know how many phone calls I picked up? 1. The other ones I just texted, hey, what do you need? Right? We're becoming that style of communicators where rather than human interaction, we're choosing electronic interaction. And that's going to have repercussions over time.
Have you ever had an experience, or has there been a time where you were trying to read somebody's face and you just missed the mark completely?
Sure. Here is a rule of thumb. If somebody volunteers somebody else that has a flatter upper lip, they're always going to tell you you're wrong. It took me forever to understand this, but even in the book, people with flatter upper lips, well, we even say the phrase, keep a stiff upper lip. And what does that mean? Don't share your emotions, kind of keep everything to yourself. And literally, people with flatter upper lips don't like the idea that you know more about them than they want to tell you. So Janine Driver is a perfect example, the one I talked about, my friend who wrote the body language books. Janine will tell you about her life, but if people ask her too many personal questions, even though she shares everything about herself, she's like, whoa, why are you asking so many questions about me? We don't even know each other yet. So when you see somebody's got a flatter upper lip, two things I'll do. One, if somebody else volunteers them, I write down on a piece of paper, they're going to say everything is wrong, right? And I just put that down. And then, because I know that's what's going to happen. Nope, not true, not at all. And the funny thing is, people try and get stoic. So this weekend, I'll show you an example. You can tell I'm a visual guy because I always want to show you pictures of stuff, but that just reinforces the point. So at the event I was at this week, people would just stand around the booth and have their faces read, right? And so they go, okay, now read my coworker. So in all the people that were there, if the person with the flatter upper lip didn't volunteer, I know that they're going to dispute everything I say. Now, on the inverse of that, if somebody with a flatter upper lip, I was in with Brad Lee in Vegas last year, Andy Elliott, Brad Lee, and Sam Taggart had an event called Closer School, and I spoke there 2 days, and people would come up and volunteer to have their face read, because what I want people to see is in the audience, hey, you guys can do this just with what I taught you on eyebrows. So people would come up, and the girl came up with a really flat upper lip, and she was shaking. I said, all right, you guys heard me say earlier, keep a stiff upper lip. People with flat upper lips don't like the idea that people knowing her. I said, so we all need to acknowledge that she overcame part of what she is to come up here. And I said, are you feeling okay? She's like, I am nervous as hell. I'm like, yeah, I know. But it was just to show that when somebody volunteers and they have a flatter upper lip, then they're putting themselves out of their comfort zone, because the way that flatter upper lip works is until they start sharing information with you, they want to keep a barrier between you, right? So they'll get that wrong. I've had people who just tell me, nope, that's absolutely wrong. Now, what do I have? I kind of have big ears and I have large eyes. Well, so it would be hard to tell, what are you? So somebody would have to listen, and if they hear my wording, I'll say things like, hey, I'll see you later, can you see where I'm coming from? They would know I'm more visual than auditory. So I've gotten those things wrong, and here's an interesting challenge that's come up more in the last year or two. And when I'll say, hey, you look more like you're a visual person versus an auditory person, like, yeah, no, I don't even read books, I just do Audible now. And I go, is it because you don't have time to sit and read books? If you had time, which would you do? Would you want to hold a physical book, or would you want to do Audible? Oh, no, I'd want a physical book. I go, okay, then you're visual. But this day and age, people have the choice to always be learning, and it's kind of like an addiction. I'm bad about this. Like, I haven't listened to modern radio. I don't watch. I watch TV shows that are on HBO or something like that, like series. But I don't watch live TV. If some friends are going to a bar to watch a game, I'll swing by to watch the game. It's more the socializing than it is to watch the game. But I always have an Audible on. So I polished off a book by Daniel Priestley in the airport the other day, and immediately downloaded David Goggins' new book so I can start listening to that. That's how I spend my working time walking around, whatever. So people think they're more auditory. It's more that because they think that because they can get more done than carrying around a physical book. But they still can be visual people. Does that make sense?
100%, because you just explained me to a T. I would rather read a physical book, but I listen to Audible for two reasons. I can do other things while I'm listening to the book, and I can listen to the book faster than I can physically read the book. I've improved my listening skills significantly, and it's taken a lot of time to move from 1 to 1.5 to 2x so that I can cognitively hear everything and understand what I'm listening to. But 100% I would rather read the physical book, but I need efficiency, I need speed, I need the information quickly, and I need to be able to do other things, and Audible allows me to combine all that. And just a side note, if you liked Goggins' first book, I just finished the second book last week, and it's going to blow your mind. So
I just downloaded it in the airport yesterday. When did I fly home? Saturday. Literally. So I was trying to listen to a book called How to Persuade and Get Paid by Philip Jones, but I just couldn't get into it. Even he talks fast. So here's an Audible tip that you kind of hinted towards. For those of us who are visual learners, increase the speed because it forces you to pay attention. Because when I first started doing Audible, I'd have to listen to the books 4 damn times because I'd be talking like, and then, I would see anything and I wasn't listening. But when I sped it up to 1.5 times, 2 times, it forced me to listen to the book. And so I couldn't get into his book, and I had to listen to it at 1 speed, but I literally downloaded Goggins' new one, Never Finished, so I can start that today. But yes, so in answer to your question, it's not 100%. Nothing is. Is it high 90s? Yes. Where have I had students come back who've read the book, who've taken my course, who've seen me speak? I mentioned to you before we got started, I started off the talk because you're in front of a bunch of door-to-door salesmen, right? And they're thinking, why should I listen to this guy? Well, one of my first slides is how to build rapport, how to close more, how to get free upgrades in hotels and airplanes, and get free food and drinks, right? Because we all want free stuff. And so one of the guys who saw me speak here in Dallas at Sam Taggart's Mastermind, he came up to me the night before. He's like, hey, I used your trick to get bumped to first class on a European flight. I'm like, hey, if you're coming to the talk, will you please come up and talk about it? So I screwed up because I called him Chris instead of Cody. I'm like, hey, Chris, will you come up here? He's like, you mean Cody? I'm like, yeah, see, look, because I suck with names. So he still came up on stage. And he talked about that when he went to the front desk, the lady had rounded eyebrows. And so he went up, he's like, hey, how's everybody else doing? Is your crew good? Are you doing, he asked about everybody around her first. And then he made his request. So how do you speak to somebody with rounded eyebrows? You talk about everyone else first, them second. So he started with all of her coworkers, brought it back to her, and then said, hey, I would really love if there was a way to get into first class. I'm in business class, but first class I want to be able to lay down, you name it. And he made the request, and guess what? She bumped him up for free. And it was because instead of coming up and just demanding something, he spoke her language and he paid attention to her. And now let's say that he never got the upgrade. He still left her off in a better place than when he got there, because nobody's nice to gate agents, right? They're struggling to get on board. They want to get on board first. The plane's delayed. Somehow they control Mother Nature and maintenance, right? And people are just rude to the people working the gates. So you can do that. Hotels, nobody really talks to the person at the front desk other than, oh, hey, I see your name tag. How are you doing? And, they're not even paying attention. I'm like, oh, hey, how's your day going? And not really paying attention to them, right? So it's all those little things that you could do to make people feel seen and heard, and it makes a huge difference. So I challenge people. I'll say, I love the coffee game where you pay for the next person's coffee, but while you're doing that, or instead of doing that, either or, pay attention to the barista, because all they do is take orders all day long from people I need my chai, tea, coffee, venti, 3 almond, 2 pump, whatever. But people rarely stop and pay attention to the person. So when I order my coffee, I literally stop, say, hey, how are you doing today? And I literally wait for their answer instead of immediately start looking at the menu. And then I look and figure out a facial feature and talk to them in their language, and then I move on, because you leave them in a better place versus you buying. Here's what just drives me nuts. I work from Starbucks. I see people who are like, ooh, I'm going to buy the next person coffee, but they don't tip the person making the coffee, right? It's kind of funny when they do that, but it is, look, at least we're all being nicer to each other. It's just degrees of niceness. We could do better. But that's the whole thing. This skill just makes people feel seen and heard. And if I spent the entire podcast, right, like this, looking down at your body language, you would think, what's wrong with this guy? That's the advantage of analyzing facial features, is because we're giving people our time and attention while we're figuring out how to bond with them. And people can tell if you're genuinely trying to converse with them versus if you have commission breath and you're only thinking about your product or something else. Like, we can almost feel intention, right? And when you're doing this with facial features, it's almost like they can tell that you're trying to create rapport because you're giving them that face-to-face.
So when you start into a conversation, and let's, for instance, the barista at Starbucks,
right?
You're gonna pick out 1 or 2 facial features right away, and then as the conversation goes, then you're kind of looking for some of those other facial features, and
correct,
and judging by the response and what's going on around you. I guess this isn't just a, hey, I look at you once and I understand everything about you. There's a process to this, right?
There is. Again, what you could do is, let's say that you go to the same coffee shop over and over. You look at one feature on the person, then you go home, you get the flashcard, and you go, what does that feature mean? So the first step, like I mentioned, gamify it. The first thing is, how many can I identify? Then, so I use the acronym FACE, okay? Because it's easy, and what do I teach? I teach about faces, right? So the F is find the feature you're interested in. Go find a picture of them, or even on a live person, what's the feature? Then go back and assess what that feature means. So after you've learned to identify the feature, is it rounded, is it angled? Then go back and assess what the meaning is. Then convert what you want to see, or you want to say, to how they would best understand it, and then express what you want in their language, right? So if you just think face, find, assess, convert, and express, that's how you learn to analyze faces. Now, the challenge I have for people is, look, this is Mac's book. I get nothing from this at all other than he's my mentor. He taught me this skill. If you get the book, buy 2, because you want to give one to somebody else, because that way what you do is you go out and you gamify it. That excelled my learning like you would not believe. So my buddy Javier got certified the same time I did. I convinced him to come to a few classes. He doesn't use it unless we're out somewhere. I'm like, all right, Javier, what does this say? And he can do a good job of picking it back up, but he's not to where I am because I used it on a daily basis. But when we first started learning this, when we'd go places, it'd be like, all right, what kind of eyebrow? Hey, what kind of nostril? Hey, what kind of ear? What kind of chin? You name it. And because you're challenging each other, that's how you gamify it and you learn it that much faster. Like I mentioned, flashcards are good. I have an online course, and the course I do speaking and consulting. But when you have somebody else who does it with you, it's no different than any other skill. The first thing is knowledge. The second thing is implementation, and then repetition. And the person who really taught me a lot of that was Brad Lee. I don't know if you know Brad at all. He's a freaking rock star. You have to follow him on social media. That guy's made impact in my life in so many ways. Being part of his closer school on Tuesdays, you get to interact with him for an hour. It's insane. So going from fanboying him to being on his stage, it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, holy shit, pinch me. But that's what he talks about is knowledge, but you have to apply it and you have to have repetition. That's the reason really good salespeople, what do? They role play. And they come up with objections and things like that. You can do the same thing. You can go out and you don't have to role play, but you just pick people out. Like I used to go to Deposit Photo and just pick up people's faces and go, okay, what is this? What is that? So you can do it on your own. You can do it at home. When you want to do body language and stuff, what you can do, a fun one is like body language books, pick it up, put a show on, hit mute, and see how their body language is. So a great one is like house hunters. Which house are they going to try and buy? Well, you can look at their body language and figure out which one are they nodding and doing a lot of things on, or which one are they subconsciously shaking their head no. You know, you name it. So there's so many things that you can learn. It's just how do you apply it? So servers are my favorite people to practice on, because even if you want to tell them what you're doing, again, just say, hey, I heard this guy Brian. I kind of think he's full of crap. He said these eyebrows mean this. You're going to get to talk to the server, right? And if they think that's a way to help them make more in tips, they'd love you for it. But it's a way because nobody else pays attention to servers. I've been to so many places where people are like, yeah, okay, I'll have this or this, and they keep talking to that person. They don't even make eye contact with the server. And I'm like, God, I used to be a server, so that's freaking rude. But that's why I say practice on servers, practice in airports, malls. Like you can say, hey, from this store to this store, I'm going to see how many rounded eyebrows I can see. And then once you learn to identify it, then you think, okay, what do rounded eyebrows mean? How would I interact with that person? And then once you get past that part, you go out and you start practicing it. Now here's the craziest part. I'll do something called paid practice, which is I don't go out and teach people how to do it, but I'll get hired to go to events and do nothing but analyze faces. So they'll set me off to the side at like a president's club, a retreat, something like that. And it's more of an entertainment service. And I call it paid practice because they pay me to go there and I just get to practice the skill and get feedback as well. And so I do it, and the number one thing that comes up is usually if it's a romantic interest that they bring to the event. Let's say they've been married for 20 years, and I'll use you as an example. That little verbal affirmation line right there, like I'll sit there and say, okay, do you guys want to know what you have in common or what you have different? So if one of them has that verbal affirmation line, I'll say she lives off of, or he lives off of, sincere verbal compliments versus you're more of this. And they're like, why did we go to a marriage counselor? And I'm like, I know, it's written on our faces. So when you learn this skill, it's not just to meet new people, but it's to deepen existing relationships as well, because you're learning a new way to understand people. And it's crazy because I did one for the Texas Workforce Commission, which is if you've been laid off, you get unemployment, you go get there and get training. Well, they're dealing with people who are at sometimes their lowest in life. I've been let go from a company before, and it's hard because it's your identity, and you don't really know what to do. Like we'll run out the door like Rocky up and down the steps if we quit the job on our own, but if we're kicked out the door, it's like, well, what did I do? Why wasn't I good enough? You start questioning yourself. So I was teaching this to people who have to help people who are going through a hard time. But what we also did while we were there is after I taught them, I stuck around for another hour and I analyzed faces for everybody. And these were people who have been working together for 10 years that didn't know how to interact with each other. And there's all kinds of things like, again, who's visual, who's an auditory person, who's the one that likes verbal compliments, how do you interact with people? So that's the best part is it's not just new people, it's not just a sales skill, it's a life skill.
I'm blown away right now. I need you to tell people what you offer, where they can find you, because people need to learn this skill.
So there's two websites. They're going to go to the same place. It's Subtle Skills, SUBTLE Skills. Sometimes people can't remember that, so you can just go to learntoreadfaces.com, and that will redirect to my website. What do I offer? So the book you can get on Amazon. I do sell the flashcards on the website. I have an online course right now. It's Face Reading Basics that you can get through Lightspeed. And I'm creating industry-specific ones. So after going to the door knocker one, I'm working on one that's called Closing More with Who's Behind the Door. So I'm going to be doing ones that are industry-specific, so that way you can tailor what you learn to how you'll talk to the potential customer. But my favorite thing is my ex-wife, when she asked, what do you want to do? And this was 15 years ago. She's like, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to travel the world and get to teach people something. So my favorite thing is to go and do consulting gigs, do training, speak at events, because I get to see the world and you get to leave people in a better place than you found them. So that's really what I'm passionate about. But I want people to learn like Mac did for us. To get sappy for a minute, my life changed because this guy, Mac Fulfer, decided to not just learn something, but taught it to other people. And that's the same impact I want to have, because I know what it's like to be present and be in the prison of your own mind at the same time, and that's a feeling, and it's a sucky place to be. If I can help people get out of that by focusing on other people, it's a win-win. Like, what is a simple course I put together that's purely for fun that I made really cheap is if you go to lookingforloveandallthewrongfaces.com, it's a basic version of it, so that when you can look on people's dating profiles, you can figure out what do you have in common and what's different. So it's not about judging the person, but I mentioned earlier about upper eyelids. So I used to be married to somebody who had a fuller upper eyelid, so she was a we person. She had that verbal affirmation line right here, and I did not do a good job of always giving her sincere verbal compliments. And because I don't have a lot of eyelid, I was fine doing things by myself. And that was one of the things that we had strife and struggle with, was she was a we person, I'm a me person, and we didn't figure out how to meet in the middle. We figured out that thing about the auditory versus the visual, but there were still things that literally on her face told me how to interact with her, and I didn't do a good job of it. So it's literally every time you look at somebody, you just think, okay, are they a physical touch person? Are they a verbal affirmation person? Are they visual? Are they auditory? And then you just have to remember to treat them the way they want to be treated. So it's kind of like the golden rule, but it's what their face tells you about them. So
it's a way to understand almost a love language. It's a way of understanding love languages just by understanding the facial features of the person, which is amazing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, look at me. I've got literally no lid at all. Like, I operate by myself just fine.
Yeah.
So you've nailed me to a T with that one.
Right. And that's the funny thing is, you brought this up. People are like, oh, this is just gaslighting. You're just telling people what they want to hear. And so I'll say, and you saw us do this in Phoenix, I'll say, okay, show me a picture of somebody on your phone, somebody who's not here, that I can still analyze what their face is, and it'll be either right or wrong, but it's not you looking and nodding and saying things to excite you. And that's the number one thing. A guy named Ryan Majin, he did a TikTok video with me, hit like 3.5 million views. I mean, this guy can get million views like it's insane. He's a freaking genius. But the number one thing was people like, oh, it's gaslighting. You're just telling them what they want to hear. And I'm like, well, there's not a lot of negative facial features. Now, there are downsides. Like, if you see this line in my ear right here, that's called a heart line. So if you see that on people, I always tell them, like, hey, you need to watch your cholesterol. You need to watch these things. Like, I have to get mine watched because these are called heart lines. There are negative facial features. A downturned nose, it's in every book about villains, because what do they care about? what they want first. So it's almost like their nose is blocking them from sharing air with other people, and they just want everything for themselves. So there are negative facial features, but it's one of those things that there's more about, because it's about understanding. You're just literally saying what's on their face. And I'll tell them, if you think it's gaslighting, the difference between somebody who's gaslighting and what I do is you can come back to me in a day, a week, a month, and I'm just going to reanalyze your face. So I'll repeat what I told you if your face hasn't changed, versus somebody who's gaslighting can't remember what they told you.
Yeah, that's a great litmus test. Is if you can do it the same 6 months later, then yeah.
I was going to say, the way that it can be consistent is I teach it top to bottom, left to right. So if you're starting with features, I start with forehead, then eyebrows, then eye, then nose, then nostrils, then lip, chin, jaw, you name it. And that's why I can repeat it, because you're literally going like you read a book is how you read a person.
As we start to wrap up, there is one question I love to ask all of the guests, and that is, what is one important lesson you've learned in life, could be about anything, that you want to share with the listeners?
We get out of our own way by focusing on other people. And we spend too much time in our own mind worrying about what other people think of us. And life is a lot happier if you focus on other people. And not to say that you should ignore yourself, but when you focus on building rapport, how can I help somebody? What knowledge do I have that somebody else can learn from? Right? When we do that, life is just better. We have all the time in the world to sit with ourselves and think whatever thoughts, but when we're out and around, we can help other people. That's where life changes. A huge book that I absolutely love is The High Five Habit by Mel Robbins. In that, you get up every day, you walk to a mirror, you high five yourself, and you say something nice to start off your day. Because most people don't like what we see in the mirror, because, I got this scar, or I got this zit, or I have whatever. And when you learn to start liking the person in the mirror, it also makes a hell of a difference. So I know I just gave you two things, but what the
hell. Brian, where can people, you mentioned the website, where can people find you on social media?
Sure. Everything is Subtle Skills. So Instagram, TikTok, you name it. Ironically, because I worked for a corporation, I always did everything under Subtle Skills. Now, as of December 1st, this is my full-time gig. So it's also Brian Galke on Facebook and Instagram. But most of the tips and tricks and everything that I show people are on Instagram or TikTok as Subtle Skills.
I'll make sure to include all the links to your social media, your website, down below in the show notes. And for anyone that's looking, all the people that Brian mentioned, Bradley, Mel Robbins, Steve Sims, and Janine Driver, they're all on thelifeedge.com. So if you want to learn more about them, you can search them on the Life Edge. And just, Brian, thank you again for being a guest. This was just eye-opening. I'm so excited to have you. I was excited to share the information you have with the listeners. I think everyone can benefit from what it is that you offer.
Absolutely not. And we already talked. I'll be on Life Edge at some point too.
Yeah, you're actually going to be on Life Edge before this drops, so no worries.
Even better.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian, again for being such an amazing guest.
Oh, hey, thank you for having me. I love this stuff. So it was a pleasure meeting you in Scottsdale. You never know. That's a great point, right? Go to as many events as you can, because you never know who you're going to sit next to. That's how we ended up here.
Exactly, 100%.